Let's switch gears now to the economy. Just down the street from RT Studios earlier today, some pretty big talks going on between President Obama and top lawmakers over the battle to come to an agreement on raising the $14.3 trillion debt ceiling. While raising taxes on the wealthiest Americans seems to still not be on the table, more cuts to programs that help the poor may be on the table. This is a battle that's brewing in a much more concentrated way a little further down the road, in the state of Minnesota, where the state government there is still shut down. There are similar issues there. The Republican-led legislature refuses to raise taxes, even on the wealthiest 2% of the population there. Governor Mark Dayton, a Democrat, doesn't want to cut any more programs. It is very important to keep an eye on what's going on there. I know a lot of lawmakers are. Protesters are now starting to take to the streets. I talked to this a little earlier with Gerald Celente, publisher of the Trends Journal and director of the Trends Research Institute. I asked him for his thoughts on the recent government shutdown in Minnesota and what this might mean for the U.S. on a larger scale.
It's the beginning of what we're going to see more of. As governments continue to fail, state governments, we all know about their pension problems and other issues that they cannot meet, funding issues in the future. So you're just going to keep seeing this spiral out of control. And it's also very interesting to see what they cut first. Let's close the parks. You know, it's the holiday weekend. Let's make sure that the people have nowhere to go, the people that could afford it the least. And you just keep bringing that forward, Christina. It's the same thing that the Obama administration and the Republicans are talking about. It's cutting the people's programs. I have it. Those veterans are making too much money in their benefits. Let's cut those. Why don't we cut some Social Security benefits? People aren't getting much now. We could even lower that. And in the meantime, let's give those multinationals like General Electric that made $14 billion last year, they don't have to pay any taxes at all.
Doesn't seem to really make sense. I mean, it seems to me a lot of what this is about is a growing gap in inequality and what it means. Now, a lot of people have been talking about this. I want to play a clip of an interview of former National Security Advisor Dr. Zbigniew Brzezinski from yesterday. He was on MSNBC's Morning Joe, and he gave some of his predictions what could be around the corner.
The sense of social injustice can be terribly demoralizing and politically, in the long run, very dangerous. It can politicize socioeconomic issues, create radicalism, class conflict, extremism. And I think that's a real risk in our society.
Dr. Brzezinski also talked about seeing a slide into, quote, intensified social conflicts, hostilities, and radicalism. Gerald, I mean, do you think that this is what's ahead? Or will people be taking to the streets across this country?
Yes, they're taking to the streets all over the world. They have the big lie out there, for example, that it's a pro-democracy movements going on in the Middle East, North Africa. It has nothing to do with it. Look what's going on in Spain. Look what's going on in Greece. It's the same story. This isn't radicalization. It's called fascism. It's the merger of state and corporate powers. Let's call a spade over here. The big guys are getting all the breaks, and the burden's falling on all of the people. So of course this is going to happen. But of course it's old news. It's what we wrote about a year ago. Off with their heads 2.0. The people know the game. When the money stops flowing down to the man on the street, the blood starts flowing in the streets.
I think a perfect example, and I do. I think it's important to look all around the country. This country is made up of cities and towns, even some of the smallest towns. There's one in Texas called Alto. They just laid off their entire police force. And from what I understand, that state also has no money for new textbooks in public schools. So from an economic standpoint, I know you say this isn't a news story. How should we see this, these things happening in our towns, in our schools?
It's a much bigger picture. It's the beginning of a great war that we've been writing about. You're seeing the global Ponzi scheme collapse. The only way they keep it going is by printing this digital money that's not worth the paper it's printed on. And Christina, here's the great hypocrisy. As they're talking about, you know, readjusting the consumer price index, which they've already readjusted, and as they talk about Social Security and veterans' pensions, cutting those, What are they not talking about? How about the defense budget? How about the $1.2 trillion being spent in defense and defense-related projects each year? Not a peep.
Well, I mean, I think they are talking about it a little bit, but they're making cuts that sound big to us. You know, the first one, I think, was $78 billion. But you're right, Gerald. I mean, that's a drop in the bucket in the defense budget. But they are talking about it, just to be fair.
They're talking nothing, though. It's jive talk. $40 billion a year doesn't add up in a $14.3 trillion deficit.
And that was Gerald Celente, publisher of the Trends Journal and director of the Trends Research Institute.